Attacks on Jewish lives, communities, and synagogues. The nation of Israel charged as a criminal state, singled out for condemnation, boycott, and divestment. They face unfair press in the global media and hostility within the UN. The people of Israel live under constant threat of war and terrorism. Now is the time to defend Israel's basic right to exist. Now is the time to stand with Israel.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this very special program about CBN Israel. I'm Ashley Key. Anti-Semitism, it didn't end after the Holocaust. Today, it poses a real danger to the Jewish people everywhere and threatens the very existence of the Jewish state. We have to stand against this onslaught and firmly declare to the world, never again. CBN has decades of experience as both an international broadcasting network and a humanitarian organization. With the News Bureau based in Jerusalem, we are uniquely positioned to bring you the true story of what's happening in Israel and the Middle East. CBN has also established CBN Israel, our humanitarian ministry whose mission is to provide help and hope to Israelis in need. We're about to show you how CBN Israel helps Holocaust survivors, victims of terrorism, and Jewish immigrants. But first, joining us all the way from the other side of the world, Jerusalem, our bureau chief for Middle East News and the host of Jerusalem Dateline, Chris Mitchell. Chris, thank you so much for being with us today. Shalom to you.
Great to be with you, Ashley, and shalom from Jerusalem.
Yes. Well, Chris, you work and live in Israel, and you've lived there for quite some time. Do you see the anti-Semitism and the attacks on Israel getting better or worse?
Well, Ashley, definitely getting worse. First, we've seen a spike in anti-Semitism, both in Europe and even in the United States. We've seen attacks on synagogues and the Jewish people. Some are even fearful of being identified in public as Jews. And the threats on Israel's borders, both in the north with Hezbollah and in the south with Hamas, remain. And some of those threats against Israel have even increased. In fact, Hezbollah leader Sheikh Nasrallah has said their rockets can now hit anywhere in Israel, including sensitive military sites. But actually, the most horrific example of anti-Semitism in all of human history was the Holocaust. And today, nearly 200,000 Holocaust survivors live in Israel. Tens of thousands of them live in relative poverty and isolation. And your support can provide them with food, medicine, and comforting visits that let them know they're not forgotten.
Fira loves to walk to the garden near her apartment in Hadera, Israel, but some days it's just too hard for her to make it. She suffers from the trauma she experienced during the Holocaust in Ukraine.
I was 9 years old when the Nazi came to our village. We were forced to march to a concentration camp with no housing, just open sky. I still remember the constant hunger and the cold ground where we slept night after night.
Many of the 2,500 Jews at the camp died of exposure and starvation, but Fira survived with the help of Ukrainian neighbors who secretly handed her bits of food through the barbed wire fence.
It wasn't much, just little potatoes or pieces of bread. Many days we had no water, and when we did, it was what we could collect from the rain. We did this for half a year until those of us left were marched back to our village, which had been turned into a ghetto.
Many of Fira's family members and friends died during the Holocaust, but she lived to see liberation. She later married a fellow survivor she met in the ghetto, and together they moved to Israel.
Living in Israel was our dream, but now I'm a widow and my body aches from those days in the concentration camp. I love to walk, but I can't go very far anymore.
So CBN Israel got Fira a deluxe walker with a chair that she can fold out when she gets tired.
Every minute I have is important to me. And with this gift, I can go wherever I want. It means so much. It means freedom.
We also got Fira a washing machine for her apartment, and we take her food. CBN Israel even puts on parties for Holocaust survivors a few times each year, so they can socialize and feel a sense of community.
Loneliness is not a good thing. So each time I get together with my friends, it's like opening a window to the world. The support you give us is both physical and emotional. Having somebody remember us and care about us, we feel it. All I can say is thank you very much.
What a great story. And Fira's story is just one example of how you can be a blessing to elderly Holocaust survivors. They simply need someone like you to care. Ashley?
That's right. And you can be that somebody. Will you call the toll-free number now on your screen? You can give help and hope to elderly survivors just like Fira. Call us right now. You can be a blessing to those courageous survivors.
God has made a solemn promise to those who help the Jewish people. I will bless those who bless you. Call us toll-free at 1-800-257-9395. Visit cbnisrael.com/give or text CBN Israel to 71777 to make a gift that will bless Israel and her people in need. In appreciation, we will send you a free DVD of the CBN film, The Hope, The Rebirth of Israel. This inspiring documentary movie covers the 50 years that preceded the founding of the modern state of Israel. You'll see history unfold through the eyes of some of Israel's greatest visionaries and founders. Get your copy of this extraordinary film today. Call us toll-free at 1-800-257-9395. Visit cbnisrael.com/give or text CBN Israel to 71777.
Well, he's the founder of the Christian Broadcasting Network. He's the creator and host of one of the longest-running live television shows in history, The 700 Club. And he's here now to tell you why he took a vow to support Israel. Here's Pat Robertson.
In 1974, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was in charge of Israel. He was a noted general who had led the forces to the recapture of the Temple Mount in the Great War. And I was privileged to interview him at his office in Jerusalem. As I interviewed him, I said, "Mr. Prime Minister, what would you want America to do?" And he thought for a minute, and he said, "Be strong, be strong." Well, I was so touched because Israel was alone in those days. The Arab oil embargo had just come upon the world, and the nations were turning against Israel. And this nation was all alone. And here the Prime Minister was saying he needed a strong friend. And when I got through that interview, I went to the group that was with me. We were staying at the Intercontinental Hotel on the Mount of Olives. And as I addressed the group that evening, I made a vow. I said, whatever happens, CBN and those ministries that I'm in charge of will stand with Israel regardless of the consequences. Now that's been 35 or 40 years ago, however long it's been. But ever since that, we have kept that promise. And we have made a vow that we will stand with Israel and the Jewish people. And we still stand with Israel and the Jewish people. And they know that we, as evangelicals, are their friend. And so in this special time, I urge everyone who's listening to my voice, we must stand with God's holy people. Thank you so much.